Good evening and welcome to Mystery, Murder, and Mayhem. Tonight I'm bringing you a piece of history from my area. It's a story I had never heard of until somebody posted a bit about it in a group called Abandoned, Old, and Interesting Places in South Carolina. Now, the pictures that the person had posted with their story included a picture of an old gas station from years gone by. And the person said in the post that as he was taking the pictures, the owner came by and told how his grandfather had been murdered there in 1941. So I had to dig further into this story. And tonight I'm bringing you the details of what transpired at that little gas station nearly 81 years ago. It's Monday, and that means it's time for a new episode of Mystery, Murder, and Magic. And here's your host, Andrea Lee, and sometimes Alex. Tonight's episode takes place in Edgefield, South Carolina, and it's this absolutely beautiful area, and it's so full of history and charm. Think Mayberry, but with historic buildings on nearly every street and highway. And that little gas station that I mentioned sits on the corner of Highway 378 and Meeting Street. Well, looking at the property is like getting a glimpse into the past. There's an old-timey gas pump that stands frozen in time with the price of 60 cents a gallon, frozen right there on the panel. As charming as that little story is, though, it holds a dark story within its walls. Back in the 40s, the roads there and in most of South Carolina were unpaved. Most of the area was rural and populated with many farms. On those farms, people still used mules to plow their fields. They were just 2 years out of the Great Depression at that time, and times were still tough for most people. In late 1940, the owner of that gas station, Davis Timmerman, he had a mule that decided to wander over to a neighboring farm. Now, I don't know if something spooked him or exactly what, but while he was on the neighbor's farm, being a mule, he kicked. And in doing so, he kicked a calf, and it ended up killing the little calf. Well, back in those days, and really even still today, cattle, even a baby cow, is an investment. And when one dies, you've taken a major hit to your income. Well, the owner of that calf was William Logue. And when Logue saw what had happened, he spoke with Timmerman, and the two men agreed that Timmerman would pay Logue $20 restitution for that cattle, or for that calf. But even though they had agreed on the $20, when Logue showed up at that little store to collect the money, he changed his mind and demanded $40 from Mr. Timmerman. Well, those two men, they began arguing, and soon they were fighting. And at one point, Logue somehow got his hands on an axe, started beating Mr. Timmerman with it. Well, after he started beating him with that axe, and I believe it was the axe handle, Timmerman got his hands on a gun that he kept hidden in a drawer, and he shot Logue, and it killed him. Well, after that, he locked up the store, and even though he was beaten pretty badly, he drove into Edgefield to report the shooting to Sheriff L.H. Harling. So Harlan, Coroner John Hollingsworth, and Solicitor Jeff Griffith, they drove out to the store to investigate the scene. From their findings, they decided to arrest Timmerman and put him on trial. However, he was acquitted because the jury believed that he had truly shot Legg in self-defense. Well, that pissed a lot of people off because Legg's widow, Sue, and his brother, they decided that they had to do something about it. And what they did was they hired their nephew, Joe Frank Legg, to find somebody to kill Timmerman. Yes, it was like a murder for hire. And get this, Joe Frank was a police officer with the Spartanburg Police Department at that time. And it wasn't long before Joe Frank decided that Clarence Bagwell was the man for the job. Well, at this point, Wallace Legg had been dead for somewhere around a year. Joe Frank and Bagwell took a trip to Timmerman's store. While Joe Frank waited out in the car, Bagwell went in and asked for either a pack of gum or a pack of cigarettes. And now the stories on that detail are conflicting, but I really guess that doesn't add a whole lot of matter to the story. But anyway, Timmerman turned around to get whatever it was that Bagwell had asked for. Bagwell pulls out a .38 caliber revolver and shoots Timmerman at point blank range. And in an instant, Mr. Timmerman was gone. Joe Frank and Bagwell went back to Spartanburg, and they're believing they committed the perfect crime. And it might have been the perfect crime if Bagwell wasn't a sloppy drunk. Seems that one night he was drinking and he starts bragging about killing the man for $500 to this young woman. Well, that young woman went to the police, and when Bagwell was questioned about what he had said, police mentioned that he had been seen at that store the day that Timmerman had been shot and killed. Well, Bagwell knew that the jig was up, and he confessed to the crime. Not only that, he also pointed fingers at Joe Frank. He just wasn't going to go down alone for that crime. Well, Joe Frank wasn't going to go down alone either. And soon he was ratting out his aunt and his uncle too, telling the police that they had paid him $500 to find someone to kill Timmerman. Soon warrants were issued for the arrest of Sue and George Legg. And on November 16, 1941, the new sheriff, his name was Watt Allen, and a deputy named Doc Clark picked up the warrants from the magistrate, and they headed out to pay old Sue a visit. Well, somehow somebody found out that the law was headed out to her farm to pay her a visit. And when Allen and Clark got there, they were ambushed by Sue and a sharecropper that lived either on her farm or near her. His name was Fred Dorn. Well, Allen died from a gunshot wound to the head. Clark had been shot in the arm and stomach, but before he stumbled back out to the highway, he was able to wound Sue and Dorn with gunshots. And once Clark was back out on the highway, he was picked up by a passing vehicle. Well, drastic measures had to be taken, so then Governor of South Carolina, R.M. Jeffries, ordered that deputies from Saluda County and the highway patrolmen of the area were to arrest Sue and Fred Dorn. Dozens of officers surrounded Sue's house, and in an effort to keep the death toll down, they enlisted the help of Senator Strom Thurmond, who was a friend of the Legg family. And he was able to talk to Sue and George, and he talked them into surrendering. The next day, Fred Dorn died from his injuries, and the day after that, Deputy Clark passed away. Well, 4 months later, the trial of Sue, George, and Bagwell started, and in the end, it only took the jury 2 hours to find them guilty for their charges. And Sue Legg was electrocuted on January 15, 1943. She's only one of 2 women who have died in the electric chair in South Carolina since 1912. And on the same day, George and Bagwell were also executed. So I guess you're asking, whatever came of Mr. J. Frank? Well, he was found guilty for his part in the crimes, and he was also sentenced to electrocution. And he was supposed to be electrocuted on January 23rd, 1944. He even ate his last meal. But at the last minute, Governor Olin D. Johnston, he paid old Joe Frank a visit and had his sentence commuted to life in prison. And here's another get this moment. Within 10 years of having his sentence commuted to life, he was employed by SLED, which is the state law enforcement division here in South Carolina. And he was employed there as a bloodhound handler. And in 1960, all but 3 of the state sheriffs were all for paroling Joe Frank. Now, I've done a lot of searching. I don't know if he was actually paroled, but I believe that he was, because the next thing that I found about him after, it talked about the sheriffs wanting to parole him was that he had passed away in 1990, and it listed his address as being on Highway 56 in Cross Anchor. So I believe that parole was granted at some point. Now, in the end, that one donkey kick led to the deaths of 8 people. Now, had y'all ever heard of this story from our history here in South Carolina? I can't believe all this happened, and I'd never heard of it until now. It's just odd. I guess it's one of them things they don't tell you about in history class when you're in 8th grade in high school or junior high. But anyway, that's all I've got for tonight's Mystery, Murder, and Mayhem. Y'all have a good week, and I'll be back on Friday with an all-new What the Friday. Peace out, y'all.